Welcome to Rhyme and Reason, hosted by Dr. Barry. Today, Barry welcomes family addiction professional Waitus Carter. And now, here's Dr. Barry Reiman.
Well, hello.
Good afternoon, Dr. Barry.
How's it going, Zach?
It's a beautiful day.
You know, we meet again, episode 2 of the Rhyme and Reason podcast.
I'm very excited for this one. Not
Yeah.
that I wasn't for the last one, but this one.
No, the last one was great. You know, I'm super excited that our guest today is actually stationed in an office. No offense to Eric. We love Eric, but it was, a little difficult with someone riding on a train going in and out, and you're trying to hear them, and then they're like, and it was always like at the most important parts.
Exactly. I was actually considering doing my piece part today from a motorcycle, just to keep the tradition going.
I would have loved that,
Wind blowing through this hair.
Yeah. Well, always wear your helmet. So want to welcome all the guests, all the viewers. And today we are in for a treat. We are welcoming Waitus Carter. Waitus has been with the Seminole Indians now for 16 years. He is, not at the, how do I say this? He's basically the person where if somebody in the tribe is struggling, with substance use disorder, they go and see Waitus, and Waitus is the one who helps them find help. So let's bring on Waitus.
Hello, guys.
Hey.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. So happy to have you. I will preface by saying this is probably one of the busiest men in all of South Florida. Very hard to pin down, always on the go.
Yes.
But from what I believe and from what I've seen, you have a real passion with what you do. And,
Absolutely.
but a lot of what you do, Waitus, is kind of behind the scenes. You don't have a big name out in the community or whatever. And so we like to kind of bring on guests to kind of highlight, what they do, because you deserve some attention, right? I mean, you are grinding every single day in the trenches with your members, trying to better their lives. If you could just maybe share with us a little bit about your story and the work you do, all of our listeners would love to learn about you.
Well, thanks for having me. And basically, the behind the scenes work I got into really kind of came about as being involved with families who were interfacing with, the court systems, whether it be criminal court, probation, mental health, whether it be DCF. So basically my introduction, and I've been in the field over 20 plus years. 16 of them have been with Seminole Tribe of Florida. But seeing how addiction has really ravaged families, family systems, family units, that's kind of how I got introduced to the field. So I've been on the side of having to deal with families once they've been separated, once addiction has kind of, caused all kinds of collateral damage, and trying to help families, kind of pull things back together. And within that, experiencing a lot of different things with different members of families. So children may, have one experience. The parents may have another experience. Extended relatives may have another experience. So seeing how addiction really was affecting family units and its stability is what really sparked my interest.
How did you get thrown into this position? I mean, did you have any history at all with substance use disorder, any family members? I mean, how does one, wind up doing what you're doing?
So Myself personally, I haven't had any personal experience with addiction, but I've had many family members, many friends, and again, I worked with families in multiple capacities throughout my career. Again, in multiple arenas. So again, what really kind of just sparked my interest was the effect it was having on families and the stability that was being shaken and really just ravaged, and how that affected individuals within the family unit. And some of those individuals went on to deal with addiction through trying to cope with some of the traumatic experiences that they experienced as a result of those family separations. So all of those things kind of came up as, you know, where's my niche and how can I help try to, you know, encourage someone, get someone to see that their life is meaningful and that they have a lot of promise in front of them. So
That's really awesome. You know, it takes, and I'm sure Zach can attest to this too. It really takes a special person to, you know, work with this population. And I can speak firsthand, having done this for a long, long time. There are a lot of challenges that we face when we are fighting for someone's life who doesn't really want to fight for it themselves, right? And I don't think that's talked about enough, right? When we picture getting somebody help, they're at their bottom of their bottom or their lowest low, and they're desperate on their knees begging for help, right? I would say that happens maybe 10% of the time when it comes to actually helping people. The majority, and again, I can only speak for myself, and I could probably speak for Zach too, but I'll let him speak for himself. But, you know, the majority of people we help, right? Addiction is the only disease in the world that wants to make you believe you don't have a disease. Okay, and that's a deep statement. So if we look at, you get diagnosed with cancer, okay, maybe you're in denial at first, but then you go for a second opinion, and the doctor says this is confirmed, you have stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Your next question is, what can I do to live? And I will do anything I can if you tell me that there's a chance it's going to work, right?
right.
When you deal with people with addiction, normally they're like, I appreciate what you're saying, doc. I respect you. However, this might just be a phase, or it's just a certain issue, or I just need to get out of this environment I'm in and I'm going to be okay. There are so many barriers that go into actually receiving help that when it comes time, when it's offered, the normal reaction for most people who are in some type of state of disarray is to try to push you away and try to do it on their own. And so, you know, I'm wondering, you work with the Seminole Tribe of Florida, and it's been well documented, right, that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but tribe members receive monthly stipends for being part of the tribe. So finances are there for them to continue their use. A lot of times, you know, it's something that leads someone to treatment. They run out of money, right? And they can't afford their addiction anymore. That's not always the case, you know, when dealing with your particular population. So what would be some of the unique substance use issues that are facing Indigenous people?
Well, let me, I guess, preface that by saying, when you use the term Indigenous people, that's a really broad kind of stroke there. So all of those who are familiar with our region here in South Florida, who may be familiar with the Seminole Tribe of Florida, some may have a perspective that, you know, they're this well-to-do, wealthy group or what have you, and you know, they have unlimited access to resources and different things like that. Let me first start by saying that's not necessarily the norm when you're talking about indigenous peoples and indigenous groups. Nationally, globally, or what have you. I think historically, though, it's well documented that addiction has been something that has affected Native Americans from all walks of life, all many different tribes, nationally, globally. That has been something that has really been a significant issue across many reservations, nationwide and globally. Lots of it may be able to be, attributed to the historical trauma that has been experienced. You are talking about a group of people that has experienced oppression. Historically, you're talking about a group of people that has experienced discrimination across the board in many different ways. You're talking about historical issues where, due to misunderstanding culturally, families were traditionally kind of ripped apart because people didn't understand culturally the way family units worked within certain indigenous groups, that was the norm for them. That seemed very out of the norm for maybe the mainstream culture. So there's a lot of things that probably have happened that have contributed to why we may see some of these significant issues related to addiction. With the Seminole Tribe of Florida, which is a great group of people, it is an issue for a small group of that population. There are plenty of people who are functioning well, plenty who are doing well, contributing to society, contributing to the tribe itself, contributing to the world, and doing great things for the tribe, for Native Americans, for Americans, for the world. So I want to throw that out there as well, that there are plenty of people that are doing well. But then there are a small group that do struggle with that addiction. And it just happens to seem more concentrated because it's in a small, concentrated area.
And do you feel, could you potentially give some examples, and we'll just keep it local here to the Seminole Tribe of Florida, those that are, does it tend to be just a smaller conglomerate of the members that struggle, or are there age discrepancies? Do you see it both in older and younger? Maybe you can comment a little bit on that.
Can I add a point B to this question?
Sure.
All right. Do you also feel in general that that maybe there's a stigma with that? People also think that there's a larger proportion of people in the tribe that deal with these substance abuse issues. I think those two questions can kind of tie it together.
I would probably say yes. Yes, that, there's this perceived stigma that probably exists, obviously from misinformation, unfortunately. And again, like I said, there's plenty of, functioning individuals that are doing well for the tribe, doing well for themselves, doing well for the country, etc. And there is a concentrated group. I think proportionate wise, I think that people perceive it to be larger than what it is. But what I would say is that what crosses lines is the fact that it's affecting families. We see that it's a family disease. The individual isn't just dealing with it themselves. And that's something that is like across the board. What's unique, though, is that there are some cultural values that can also be individualized with the individual, with the family unit that they work within. So that's another.
Could you give an example of that, for instance, when it comes to the cultural values?
So, because it's very kind of closed to outsiders, there's not really a lot that outsiders know. There is a layer of protection around it. If you build relationships and things like that, you may be able to learn through association with relationships and working with individuals and families as they may disclose it to you. But to say that someone's going to readily kind of give that information to you, that's not exactly how it works. But just as all people have values, or whether they're cultural or individual or what have you, there could even be variations in how they express them, how they practice them, and that's true within the Seminole Tribe as well. You may take 10 different families, mention a cultural norm that you heard, and someone else may say, well, that's not exactly how we do it, or how we practice it, or even what that actually means. So that also taught me that you have to be mindful of the actual individual that is in front of you, that you're working with, how it actually impacts them, how meaningful it is to them, and how they actually implement it and practice it, for it to be of significance in the work you do with them. And that's not to take it as a blanket statement and say this is something that is just applicable to all. You find out very quickly that may not necessarily be the case.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you sharing all that, and we're literally asking out of curiosity because, like you said, not many people really know what goes on a reservation, because you do have that layer of protection, right? You essentially have your own laws and your own police department and your own everything. It is, you guys are an amazing group of people, but it's there. I feel like there is some mystery that is shrouded around it, and so I'm asking more for the viewers, people who are tuned in, because I find it fascinating. It really is, from an outsider's perspective, and I'm a native Floridian. I've been here my entire life, grew up in South Florida, have not left this area, and I don't really know much. And it's not from a lack of wanting to know. There's just, but the Seminole Tribe of Florida in particular is huge here, and their tentacles reach far and wide throughout the state. From restaurants, from, the Miami Dolphins, our stadium is the Hard Rock Stadium, right? We have the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino. We have the Coconut Creek Hotel, Coconut Creek Casino. That there's a lot of things that, the Seminole Tribe is a big part of the community here in South Florida.
I would say mystery and media, kind of affects people's perceptions, because a lot of what the mainstream, community understands, they're reading in the newspapers, on the blogs, they're seeing on, social media, they're seeing through news outlets, what have you. And I mean, that's a very small segment of, a group of anyone, right? And that to learn of anyone, I think you have to be mindful, you have to be respectful of being invited to the table to learn, and respectful of how someone wants to go about allowing you in their space and allowing you to absorb, who they are. And I think that also takes a level of genuineness as well. That you're genuinely there, genuinely care, and you're genuinely interested, because all people are not.
Now I'm just thinking out loud, and again, this is not based out of ignorance, but for example, within the Seminole Tribe and the reservations in particular, do they have their own school system? Is it, elementary, middle, high school, all on the reservation? Are they going to Broward County public schools? Like, how does that work? Because what I'm thinking is if everything is in one spot, and then as these kids get older and turn into young adults and then start to experience the world outside, I'm wondering, if that's a huge trigger that leads to substance use issues. How does that work? Do you know?
Well, I mean, all of the communities, I would say, have access to outside communities. They're just based in different areas. Some are in rural areas, some are in metropolitan areas. Here locally, we kind of happen to be entrenched within, one of the largest counties in the country. I mean, here locally in Broward County, access to education is mainly through schools that are available in Broward County. So whether it's Broward
Gotcha.
public schools, private schools, what have you, and the same applies to all the other county regional areas, with the exception of some of the rural reservation areas do have schools on them.
Now, are those in Hollywood as well?
No, Hollywood does not have a school on the reservation itself. So most of those kids are probably going to like Broward public schools, other private schools within the area, things like that. Some of the more rural reservations, I want to say it's like two of them actually have schools on them. So there's a mix there, even there. Some of those kids go to school on the reservation. Some of those kids go to school off of the reservation. So just depends on the family and the individual and what they're looking for. So there's definitely connection.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it was just, running through my mind, and I like to think out loud sometimes. Zach knows, and
yeah. And it made me think out loud too, for the children going to schools off the reservation, how in school, I'm sure the curriculum has only changed slightly, from the good old days when I was in school, but it's a very different version of their history that they'd be learning. They're learning the history from,
Native American history.
Yeah, the Native American history. They're learning what our version of that is rather than what their truth may be. And I would imagine that is something that one would struggle with, when dealing with outside communities, because it's not their truth.
Gotcha. Waitus, are you experiencing what I would call any barriers to care when it actually comes time to place, one of your members into a treatment facility? Are you encountering many barriers, whether it's via insurance or marginalization, whatever it is?
I wouldn't necessarily say barriers to care. I think there are always going to be some nuances with any individuals or groups for that matter. But by and large, I would say access to care is much more readily available. Now, while someone's in care, obviously there's nuances as well. Sometimes, when someone's in care, we have all of these licensing regulations and things that occur that may not necessarily, as I term it, they may not jive
Yeah.
with some of the cultural ways that a family may practice, and so sometimes there are barriers when trying to deal with those things where a family may say, hey, we'd like to kind of, utilize one of our traditional practices that we would normally use in this kind of situation. And then, a program or facility is saying, okay, well, we kind of got these guidelines that we have to follow that don't really give us room to accommodate that. So sometimes that can be a little bit of a frustration or a barrier because those things can be meaningful to the individual and to the family and very much a part of who they are and a part of their health, their healing, their recovery, etc. So sometimes those things can be barriers and other little nuances and things like that.
Thank you.
But access to care, I wouldn't necessarily say that's necessarily a barrier.
Well, yeah, access to care, and actually, we're looking forward to you, coming to Tour Recovery Unplugged on Friday. Hopefully, you as part of the Seminole Tribe organization will, have even more options, to reduce some of these barriers that may or may not exist. We do have a question from the audience right now, and Jason wants to know, are drug laws the same on the reservation as they are in Broward County?
Are drug laws the same? Okay.
Within the police department, because you guys have your own police department. So are they the same, when it comes to possession or, anything like that?
Well, my experience. So, I'm not a law enforcement agent. I never have been, so I can't confess to that. I've never been a judge or anyone of that status either. But by and large, my experience has been that, we've adhered to whatever local laws, as well as, laws within the tribe that are applicable to the reservation, whatever ordinances apply, that they've been treated no differently. The police have pretty much acted like, for those of us in Broward County, any of our local municipal departments or county departments, they pretty much enacted the same way on the reservation. So I've not seen anything different.
Okay, I appreciate that, and we like to get our audience involved every once in a while, and have them shoot some questions. So when we look at family structure on the reservation, expectations from family, whether they're cultural, traditional, traditions, do any of those things lead to any type of substance use issues? Are there, we can take just any type of more about the cultural side or traditional values of the family. Is there anything within that family unit that person coming out of it may have a higher propensity to abuse substances?
Can you rephrase the question? I want to make sure that I'm hearing it correctly.
So when we look at family structure, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to take and just very stereotypical. And I have family members who are Irish, but Irish people are
Mm-hmm.
tend to known to they love to drink, and it's almost like a rite of passage. And
Mm-hmm.
or are there certain things that in the reservation within the family structure that may lead somebody more down a path of substance use? Uh, are there
Um,
cultural values? Are there traditions? Or are there
no, I definitely wouldn't say that. Um, uh, Not anything that would be enacted that I'm aware of that would lead someone. Um, I mean, maybe potentially exposure, but that would be no different from anyone else uh, who may be in a family unit that where they've been exposed to someone else who's battled addiction or anything like that.
Mhm.
But to say that there's anything uh, that's specifically enacted that may spark or initiate or encourage it, I wouldn't say that. Um, I would say more so probably personal experience or exposure. Um, but I would also say that the level of care and concern is definitely going to be higher and concentrated as well because the family units stick together. Family units, um, could be considered much larger units than what maybe mainstream society would term as a family unit, which may deal directly with the immediate household. A family unit may not necessarily be an immediate household. It may be a number of households that make up extended relatives that are treated and interact and work with the family like an immediate household member. So, an uncle might actually function more like a father. A grandmother may actually function more like a mother or an aunt or vice versa. So,
Perfect. So this is, we have another question from the audience, and it was actually this is the perfect question because it's kind of leading where I was going with this, right? My thought was, how does somebody wind up at your doorstep, right? Like, how do they know to seek out Waitus Carter? What gets them there? So the question actually that just came in from the audience, and for people who are listening and not watching, how is addiction and mental health looked at culturally speaking within the tribe? So is it hush hush, right? Is it one of those situations, or do people have the ability to be openly vulnerable with family and peers, right? Is in outside of the reservation, and I can tell you from working with some pretty large corporate organizations, right? And we don't have to name names, but names you would know, there is still, in my estimation, a stigma that is associated with addiction. Okay. And there's this running thing now in the corporate world, and we have like human resource departments and EAPs, employee assistant
mhm,
professionals. And, one of the things that I do is I go out to these larger companies and talk about addiction in the workplace. I talk about how this is a disease, that they are not bad people that need to become good. They're sick people that need to get better, right?
mhm,
And we talk about having an open door policy at these HR departments and with an EAP so that there are no barriers to seeking help when it comes to your employer. However, the majority, if you were to poll the majority of these employees at these larger companies, their first thought is, hell no, I am not going to human resources, because if they find out that I've been using, I'm going to get the axe. I'm going to get fired. Right.
yes,
And
yes,
so that leads me to believe that this stigma, like, again, going back to my earlier analogy with the cancer, would you have a problem going into your human resource department and talking to the HR director or your EAP that you just got diagnosed with cancer and need to take some time off to go through chemotherapy, right?
Right.
There would never be a fear of redemption for that, or there just wouldn't be any type of fear to do something. But when it comes to
Right.
addiction, right? What do? Oh no, it's shrouded in secrecy and shame and stigma. So, and again, this was something I was about to bring up to you, and then Ian chimed in with this question: what does it look like on the reservation or within the tribe itself when it comes to somebody seeking help?
Well, I would say that, there is a stigma. Um, I think that crosses cultural lines, gender lines, you name it. I think just in general, uh, mental health and/or substance abuse addiction, there's a stigma associated because, quote unquote, I have a problem, I have an issue, and that uh, I need professional intervention to try to deal with. So there's a stigma associated with it. Um, what might be a little different is that um, if it's you or I, let's say we're in a larger community where we may know maybe a few people within our immediate community, etc. They don't really know who we are. Maybe they know of us because they see us on a regular basis, but they don't really know us, right? The anonymity is much different in that setting than in a setting like this where you're family with a lot of people. You're connected to a lot of people, and the community concentratedly is smaller. Word travels faster. Things that occur, just I mean, it's the anonymity isn't the way you could possibly have it if you're in an environment or area where you're not as known, right? So sometimes all of your family or a lot of your family, a lot of your associates, or someone seeing you, hearing about you, creates a barrier and saying, do I really want to go, kind of seek help? But that also happens outside. So a lot of people end up at the door because family members are concerned. They obviously have a loved one that they love deeply that they see is, battling. So they may come forward. The individual may come forward themselves, but sometimes they have to get over that ambivalent feeling. Then sometimes it could be an incident that occurs. Sometimes it could be interfacing with the criminal justice system. So it's a lot of different ways, DCFs, all kinds of ways that individuals come. But yeah, there's definitely still stigma associated with coming forward. Definitely.
Yeah, and I find it, amazing in the year 2022, we had over 100,000 accidental overdose deaths last year. Okay, that's the equivalent of a 737 airplane going down every single day of the year, if not more, right? And
Right.
the numbers are staggering, and I cannot, for the life of me, and maybe Zach can comment on this too, I can't wrap my head around why there would be shame and stigma with something that has been medically documented as a disease, right? I can
Right.
speak for myself, and I've been in recovery for a long, long time. Okay, it's been almost 26 years. That's continued, sustained abstinence, recovery, whatever you want to call it. Not everybody does that. Not everybody gets that kind of reprieve. Okay, I feel blessed. More times than not, most people don't do that. Okay, and
Right.
then when there's a relapse, right, all of a sudden there's shame, right? This is not a moral dilemma. It is
No.
not, I can't believe you did this again. Shame on you, right? Would you say that to somebody whose cancer was in remission and then all of a sudden another tumor popped up, right? It just doesn't make sense. And then there's other people who are like, well, it's their fault, Yes. Once you have sustained recovery, right, it then becomes a choice. Okay. We talk about being powerless in our act of addiction. And
Right.
that is the true essence of the word powerless. If I'm stuck in the throes of addiction, I'm addicted to opiates and I haven't used in 18 hours and I'm in severe withdrawal and somebody puts heroin in front of me, there's a 150% chance I'm going to be doing it, whether I want to or not. Okay.
Right.
Just because I need that relief. Once we surrender and come into recovery, right, we move from a state of being powerless to being empowered. And that's what I try to instill in people, is that we have to make a choices. But every once in a while, we're not perfect and we're going to make bad choices. And unfortunately, for somebody with the disease of addiction, that bad choice can kill them. Okay.
Right.
So let's say they make that bad choice and they don't die, hopefully, right? Now what? We step on them and shame them and tell them they're a piece of shit and, they can't believe you did this and how could you, and I'm offended, and oh my, so my question again goes back to A, who are we to judge? B, right, why
Mhm.
shame somebody? Why does this stigma still exist? Zach, I mean, do you have any feedback here? Like, why
I
is the stigma
you
so prevalent?
you touched on a lot of things in that, and what analogy I could kind of think of with that is, like, the recovery community is a small faction of the whole population, right? And so with the lack of education provided necessarily, or in regards to it being a disease, no matter what the medical people say, there isn't education for the general public. It's just kind of it's out there, but it's not something that is really looked at unless you are affected by addiction. Now, within our recovering community, we do not do generally when someone relapses, it's not like we have this view towards them of recovery doesn't work. Whereas on the outside, that could be a view that someone would have, that it just doesn't work. It doesn't stick. This person is not a good person who relapses. That's something, that's how I just think that outside of our own community, it could be viewed.
Gotcha. I think this is, if I could say myself, I think this is thought-provoking conversation, and I know we've kind of veered off a little bit from, the entire Seminole Tribe of Florida and the whole talk. But Waitus, you've been in this field now for a long time. You've seen probably thousands of cases over the last 20 years that you've been in the field. What I would like to ask, and I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but can you share with us, in your mind, one of your biggest success stories? And I don't mean for you personally, but somebody from the tribe that you've worked with who might have been in dire straits and now they're here, right? Like, share a little hope with us. You don't have to share the person's full name or anything like that, but just a case that you had. I mean, you helped tons of people.
Well, what I would say that there's actually, uh, several that I can think of, actually. But to kind of piggyback off of something Mrs. Zach said earlier, um, the examples that I'm thinking of, these are individuals that struggled for exponential amount of years. Some, you could say decades. Some you could say, several years. Some you could say, an extended amount of time. And, for some, maybe it was the 7th year. For some, it was the 10th year. Maybe for others, it was year 3. But what I would say that I noticed is that with each example, somewhere in there, there was that surrendering. So there wasn't that, struggle or that continued struggle of, I've got it under control. I know what I'm doing. It's not that bad, and I mean, you could talk about, individuals who were professionals, who maybe weren't necessarily professionals. And when I say professionals, I mean someone that could have been working at a desk job in an office, as well as someone who could be like a manual labor professional as well, but all, varieties of professionals, or just, the average everyday citizen. But again, what I noticed is that there came a point where there was this surrendering of, hey, this is out of control. And I've tried doing things my way, and I thought that I had it under control, and I don't. And then you saw this process where, an individual was open and saying, you know what, things that may have been recommended over the last 10 years that I resisted, you began to see them say, you know what, I'm going to try it. What else do I have to lose? And you saw this rebuilding and things like that. And there was also a point where there was a connection made of meaning. So at some point in some type of work, some type of discussion, some type of connection happened where some deep sense of meaningfulness was tapped into. And the individual was able to, identify a source of meaning that was valuable and worth fighting for. And that was sort of like the glimmer of hope that kind of led to, tremendous, I've seen families with 7, 8, 9, 10 kids, totally ravished, but they've been able to be reunified, because the individual or the individuals who were directly struggling with addiction began to really, deal with it, but also the family unit. And that's what I wanted to piggyback on too. Most of the time, what I see is, hey, we have a member of our family unit that needs help. Here, you work with them and fix them, and then give them back to us, and everything will be fine.
That sounds perfect.
And we know that doesn't really work like that, that there's so much support that's needed. Understanding how to work with an individual, understanding how to understand who they are, what they've experienced, goes a long way in terms of trying to work with them. But you're just talking about people who may have offended members within that family structure. We're trying to rebuild trust. And sometimes that's a barrier in and of itself, because there's always going back to, I remember when you stole the car, or I remember when you pawned this, or I remember when you went to jail and I had to, take out a mortgage on the house to get your legal situations. A lot of things come up, and it kind of goes back where maybe someone is beginning to feel like, I can actually overcome this. And sometimes they go backwards and say, why even try? Because the folks around me don't believe, because I've burned so many bridges and created so much collateral damage over time. Why do I even try? So that family unit that's around them, being educated and understanding, the disease, and not just settling into the thought, like you said, of it's just mere, willpower, and you can stop. Well, if it was that easy, well, everyone would just stop. It isn't. It isn't. And there's a lot of support that goes a long way to helping individuals begin to start believing, because a lot of people don't even believe sometimes. We have to believe for them sometimes initially, for them to begin to believe that they, their life can be different than what it is.
Wow, man. I mean, you bring up so many good points. And I'm so happy that we got you on here today because, and forgive my language, you know what the fuck you're talking about. Okay. we're going to throw the F-bomb out there because we can. But I will tell you that the family is probably the single most important structure and thing that needs to be in place when succeeding at actually getting help for one of the loved ones, right? It's the family support, family togetherness, the family unit. There's a reason this is called a family disease.
Yes.
And I don't think that's talked about enough.
Mm.
I think when I've done interventions in the past, the family solely wants to focus only on the individual that needs help.
Yes.
How about the root causes, right? What's your part in this? And I've said this before. If I was in your family, I'd be using too, right? And that's not casting blame. Well,
Right.
maybe it is, but well deserved, right? There's
Right.
reasons why people do things. I'm also a believer that as a treatment professional or a clinician or an interventionist or any of the roles that we may have, it is not our job to convince a client that they don't enjoy substances. And again, I don't think this is talked about enough either, right? There's this view that if you don't want this, don't worry, you're not going to get it. And you have to be 100% ready, otherwise, you're not going to succeed. I call BS. That wasn't my story. I didn't wake up one day and say, today's going to be an awesome day to give up my best friend and never see him again, right? When you use heroin, it is literally like getting a hug from God. Okay. There's no other way to describe that feeling. Our job as professionals is not to try to brainwash somebody into believing that they don't enjoy how that feels, right?
Right.
Our job as professionals is to help an incoming client understand how much better they could feel in the long term if they're able to give up that short-term gratification, right? So we
Right.
look at instant gratification versus delayed gratification. And addiction is completely and totally based on instant gratification. Feel good now, feel like shit later. Delayed gratification, when it comes to recovery, is feel like shit now, and that's okay, but you will feel better later. Well, Dr. Barry, how much longer later? I don't know. But I promise you, if you just stick it out just long enough, you will get to that other side. And you brought up that key word of surrender, right? And most people look at the word surrender as a negative connotation. We look at war and somebody raises the white flag and they surrender. It can't be looked at like that, right? There is a relief that comes with surrender. I fought out there, tooth and nail, right? I tried every which way from here to Sunday, trying to continue on the path I was on of self-destruction, trying to convince myself that I was making myself feel better along the way, right? And an addiction had a grip on me. And until I got to that place where I slowly started to let go, I stuck around just long enough where the reward of that surrender, the reward of being clean, started to outweigh the reward of going back to what I was doing, right? People say, oh, you're taking the easy way out when it comes to using, right? I mean, Zach, I know you have a history of addiction.
Oh,
If you use the way I did, was there anything easy about it?
no, it was basically having a wonderful 4-time jobs with a nice side piece of the criminal element. I was exhausted all the time, but it's and like you said about feel good right now, deal with the consequences later, and then how long does it take once you stop using to feel better? I did not enter recovery super gung-ho because I had so many failed attempts before. So I find sometimes when people ask me that question that I don't want to give my version of my story because I had a very slow start, but I've seen it happen with other people quickly with how willing they are. And I mean, my addiction lasted a very long time. I got clean at 42 and I was ready to retire 10 years prior to that from my many professions as a con man addict.
But wait, I thought you were only 30 now, so that's interesting.
Listen.
That's just how you look.
It's just, it's good lighting. I just want to come across looking that way, not actually being that old, that young.
Well, at the end of the day, we are all together facing a crisis, okay? And let's not make it all dark and dreary because there is a lot of hope behind this. There are millions upon millions of people that are living in recovery today. There are millions and millions of people who have found happiness and solace, right? Who have become to be whole without incessantly having the need to fill something within us that actually creates a bigger hole, right? Waitus, we're coming to the end of our show here. I want to just thank you from the bottom of our hearts because you have tons of insight, and I hope people heard and hung on to every word you said. Do you want to leave us with any closing remarks, anything we should know about, the work you do, the Seminole Tribe of Florida, anything like that? And I'm looking forward to seeing you Friday.
Likewise. One thing that I guess that really revolutionized how I looked at things and approached it. Someone came to me at one point and they said, you know what? For the average person that is a habitual speeder, it usually takes them 7 tickets before they will change their behavior. And when they brought that information to me and I looked at, I said, I will never look at the process of change the same again. Because if that can happen for someone who's not dealing with changes that can happen to the body, to the brain, that are actually impacting your responses to things, then how much more challenging is it for someone that is actually dealing with that? So that revolutionized how I thought about the whole process of change across the board, but definitely with addiction. And it gave me a sense of compassion that you have to have and that you absolutely need, that people can feel. People can feel genuine passion. And a lot of times that's the catalyst that can at least start someone to believe that they can take that road towards the recovery that they're looking for. So.
Thank you. I mean, thank you so much for that. I've never heard that analogy, and I'll admit I'm a habitual speeder. I've gotten to the point where, I've gotten a ticket and then found myself speeding away. After I got the ticket, I'm like, he's not going to follow me. Like, what's the chances, right? But like, and it makes it easier now when you call these traffic ticket guys, you pay $69, no points, no court date. So it's like, $69. I just want to take this time Jason said the 20th time was the charm for him. So, Jason, some are sicker than others. 20 tickets is a lot. Keep on speeding, brother. Anyways, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank Zach as my co-host. I also want to thank the viewers. We've had so many comments in here. My son was so blessed. Thank you so much. I find these Recovery Unplugged lives so helpful for understanding our son. Jason clarified, not 20 tickets, 20 rehabs. That's even worse.
Is Jason trying to make this a competition here? 35, Jason, 35.
35 rehabs for Zach. And Zach, how long are you clean now?
Next month, 6 years.
Amazing. So there is hope. But yeah, Jason, you are sick. 20 rehabs. Zach, you're sicker. So next week, we're gonna talk about that. Anyways, Waitus, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.